welcome back to another episode of Headgears to Handshakes. I'm here with Senator Scott Martin. Thanks for coming today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, before we do anything, I want to talk about some recent events that happened with the police officers, and one of those guys was a wrestler. I just wanted to maybe give you a chance to talk about that, and obviously condolences to them and their families.
Yeah, a heartbreaking couple weeks here for our country, but recently here in Northern York Regional Police Department, we had some officers who were serving a warrant, and 5 of them were shot and 3 of them lost their lives. And unfortunately, one of those that did was a young man, still young, Cody Becker. He was a wrestler for the Spring Grove Rockets, state qualifier. He had 118 wins in high school, and went on to wrestle at Millersville University. And I think he graduated high school around 2004. And just real heartbreaking. I know a lot, and how I first heard about it was through some of the fellows in the wrestling community that hung out with Cody and still did things with him, and just an incredible man, and the bravery. He's been honored for his bravery in the past. I believe he rescued children from a house fire in the past too, and but he was one of the ones that lost his life, and just really heartbreaking.
Yep, and obviously, our thoughts and prayers go out to the families, and I just want to do that real quick, and I don't want to start a podcast like that, but I thought it was really important that we do that.
Yeah, well, we remember him for his bravery, and obviously all those officers and their families. We keep them in our prayers, and remember what they are faced with every day. But for me, and I think we were talking a little bit beforehand, something special about the young man, and I believe his wrestling background played a huge part. His courage and his dedication to his community, and he always was giving back, and he'll definitely be missed.
Awesome. Well, that's a good segue. Let's talk a little bit about your wrestling, when you got started, and sort of your career.
Yeah, it was an interesting journey for me. I was the oldest of 7 kids. My dad was a police officer too. My mom a Catholic school teacher, and we definitely were rambunctious, and she needed to find a way to have me get some energy out. And though I was going to St. Anne's Elementary, they signed me up for Manheim Township Youth Wrestling Club, and I did it for I think a year, and then I had the brief blip of 7th and 8th grade playing basketball. All my friends were. But when I got back to high school, Lancaster Catholic, started wrestling again. And there was a guy named Tom Vargo who wrestled at Bloomsburg, who happened to be was the varsity wrestling coach there. And he pulled my mom aside at one point and said, "We really need to keep him wrestling." Because, you have the football coaches pulling you to do off-season workouts, and he really made an impression on my mom. And at the time, he said, "I think he could be a district champion someday if he really sticks at it." And so, I stuck with it, and ended up my head coach was Steve Borgia, because Vargo had retired, and incredible guy, Pennsylvania State Trooper, wrestled at Lycoming, and Ray Kaler was his assistant, who they were together for a very long time, and Ray ended up being an official locally too. And just an incredible influence on my life. I think around my sophomore year, I was probably wrestling 185, I was probably very small at that time. And I think in the postseason, they had me wrestle 167, one of the old weight classes. But the bug really bit me. I qualified for districts, and I kind of really started getting into the Mid-Atlantics and the AAU in the off-season, and started to come in physically and starting to grow. And I think I wrestled 189, and had a really good year. I think I only had 2 losses that year. But unfortunately, my junior year of high school, and a funny story, we were in districts, and I think it was the semifinals, and we had a really decent lead. And I can remember I was wrestling a kid from Milton Hershey, and I remember Coach Borgia telling me, "Just circle him. Just keep circling him." They let time run. Of course, I didn't listen. And I went in for a throw, and the way I landed on my shoulder, I popped my collarbone.
Oh, man.
And so my season, because I was ready to go to states, I was really excited. Well, I had the injury default the rest of the way out. So that next year, I really had a chip on my shoulder. And coming back for my senior year, they laughed at me because as I told them, I'm like, "I'm going to be 189 again." Of course, I came back. I was 250 pounds. I was going through this growth spurt. And So came back and had a really good senior year. I think I was 40-0. We won a state title my senior year at heavyweight. And that year was the first ever national high school championships they created. It was out at Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh, Fitzgerald Fieldhouse. Bob Ferraro, the old coach of Bucknell, and I think his son now runs it. Bobby runs the association. With an incredible tournament, and we made a great run. I think we had like a 2-time state champ from Texas. I remember in the semis, I had Dan Hicks, who was a 3-time state champ from Oklahoma. And of course, in the finals, I ended up going against a kid who had never lost a match from Virginia, a high school match. He was going to go be a football player at Florida State back then. But the most ironic part, we were friends. We actually got to talking throughout the tournament. And you could never see us coming. We were talking because our coaches were teammates at Lycoming. And here I am, in this first ever tournament, and we end up having to pair off in that. But with at the buzzer, I was able to hit a reversal to win it. It was crazy in hindsight, looking back at that stuff, but just really exciting. And it really wrestling for me was a hand-in-hand thing with football. And in my coaching years now with youth sports, I keep telling kids, you want to be a better football player? You don't need to be in the weight room the whole off season. Go wrestle.
Yeah.
Hip control, leverage, the tenacity that goes with it, to me, is something that you see make a difference in so many other athletes' lives. And so for me, I ended up along this way having this football path as well. And when I was looking at schools, we were visiting different D1 schools for football. Wrestling's so-so in terms of it, but what I found is none of them would let you want to do both, because I guess the seasons overlap so much. So when it came down to it, we had a legendary football coach here in Lancaster County named Dr. Gene Carpenter. He coached the Millersville Marauders. He lived not too far from me, but he really made a really heavy push with my parents, with me. And at the time, a Division II football program, but they were Division I wrestling. And there was something really enticing to that. And a family that we didn't have a lot, 7 kids on a police officer's salary. The prospect of my family being able to come to most of my athletic events really meant something to me. And so we ended up going to Millersville. It was a great decision. I knew it was a place I could play right away and start as a freshman and be the wrestler. And those lessons and that experience for me, as I ended up after college, got to play a little bit of professional football for a few years.
Where'd you play?
So I was a free agent with the New York Giants in 1994.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was right when Dan Reeves was the coach. They just let go of Phil Simms, their quarterback. But I think Lawrence Taylor greeted everyone as we came. I mean, it was just so surreal. I ended up playing after that about 3 years in the Arena Football League. Down in for the Memphis Pharaohs. I played a little for the Iowa Barnstormers and the Milwaukee Mustangs. And
I love arena football. I used to go. They'd have little horns in there.
Oh, it was great. I will tell you though, back then it was like grandma's green carpet over concrete. And of course, getting knocking people into those hockey walls was something else too. So, but it was fun. And I honestly thought that my life would be. I always wanted to work with kids and at-risk kids, and I thought that was going to be in my life. And I was going to work in that field and coach. And never thought I would ever get into the business I'm in now. But there's a lot of similarities. Like I really feel like I'm competing for something. You got to strategize, you got to prepare. And in a weird way, legislating or fighting to do things for your community, so whether it's like an individual case of a kid with developmental disabilities navigating the system or passing a big law, you're kind of like wrestling through all these obstacles in order to do that. And, to me, I think that's where I get my spark from. And I think I owe a lot of that to a lot of the lessons I've had on the wrestling mat and the football field.
Is there anything that you pushed forward that you feel like maybe having that wrestling background, something that was really tough, and having that wrestling background maybe helped bring it to fruition that you think was an important piece?
Yeah, there's a couple things I'd say that really we had to be really tenacious in order to get done, and probably something everyone can relate to was during the COVID lockdowns and shutdowns, and it was a real battle between the General Assembly from what their local representatives were hearing on the ground or seeing how things were being implemented and some of the inconsistencies, and, whether you're essential or non-essential. We had a business that was forced to be shut down, but the direct competitor was allowed to be open. Like, you ran into all that kind of stuff. We also ran into stuff related to whether or not sports were going to happen, whether schools were going to be open. And that was really a very frustrating time. And eventually, he had vetoed more bills that we had passed related to reopening things, or having him share the data he was making decisions based on with us. That I believe it was more bills were vetoed in that short period of time than all the rest of Pennsylvania's history.
Wow.
And he was actually even vetoing bills that passed the General Assembly unanimously, the House, the Senate, meaning all Republicans, all Democrats had voted for him. He was really dug in. So one of the tacks I took is I wrote a constitutional amendment and to restrain his powers and give more power to the General Assembly. Now, it's a longer process, but we were able to get it through the House and the Senate. It went to the voters of Pennsylvania, I think, in May of 21, and it passed overwhelmingly. And so it's weird to think. I was involved in changing the Constitution, but at least that was something that we really had to stick with, and people were really hurting, and across the board. I mean, that issue, whether it was hospitals and healthcare stuff, whether it was business stuff, whether it was school stuff. I mean, the world was upside down. So that one to me will always stand out. But then there's some real, I've done a lot in the area of things that benefit kids, and that's a wide spectrum, whether it's finding the best opportunity for them from an educational standpoint, whether it's advocating to sanction girls wrestling. I mean, to me, I was really bothered that, because I really believe in my heart Pennsylvania is one of the mecca and the epicenter of wrestling. The fact that we didn't have girls wrestling really bothered me. To see, I think at the time, before we sanctioned it, there was 32 other states that had. Trying to fight, and that really wasn't a legislative thing, but it's using your podium to try to get the PIAA to take actions or set some benchmarks to get it sanctioned. But we've done a lot of work with kids with pediatric cancer and supporting their families, kids with Down syndrome, and opportunities for them in life. And a lot of work I'm really proud of that's to the benefit of future generations. So, but again, so many lessons I say in how I do my job, how my legislative team operates is really rooted in so many of the lessons I believe that I learned on the mat.
So, how did you transition to politics? Like, when did that happen? You said you kind of fell into it a little bit?
Yeah, so I was running the local Lancaster County Juvenile Detention Center. So, kids who were breaking law, or kids in the shelter, which were kids who were either abused or runaways, and it was a county department. And we had 3 county commissioners at the time, elected county commissioners, that I wasn't super fans of. There was grand jury indictments. They treated people horribly. I think we had lost like 18 different department heads. And, you only can gripe about stuff so long. And I'll never forget, I had a friend who looked at me, and I was 29 years old at the time, and said, well, instead of griping about it, won't you do something about it? And, it was one of those moments that, I really looked in the mirror. I never thought about it. I was a guy that I pulled the sports section out of the paper. I was going to do my job. I wanted to coach, and that was it. But I just started to feel like I was being drawn to making a difference in a different way. So I was a very unassuming politician. So it's not maybe the best reason, but I kind of got involved in this business because I couldn't stand politicians. And there's some of the best people I've ever met in my life, and some of the worst. I have no problem saying that, and that's still the case. We need a lot more good people in the business. But but I was very young. I mean, I think I was when I got elected at that election in 2007. I think I was 34. I had to quit my job to run against them because of some federal Hatch Act, because we received a portion of federal funding, and so I. Luckily, I'd had on the side, I had gotten my real estate license and had a 3-unit. My first place I ever bought was a 3-unit where you live in one and rent out the other 2.
Yep.
And that was able to get me through. But I took the risk. I thought I was doing the right thing, and the voters rewarded me for it. And so I served 2 terms for 8 years as a county commissioner. And when you start getting involved in county government, you're kind of exposed at all the inner workings and the interconnectivity between the state and the federal government, and they make you do things and pay so much of it, and it could be a very frustrating process. And so around 2015, 2016, I had some folks approach me about running for the state senate, and we did, and been in there now for. This is my 9th year. I'm in my 3rd year of being in Senate leadership, overseeing the Appropriations Committee and all the monies that get allocated. And unfortunately, I'm also tied into this budget negotiation now that's about 3 months late. But it's a wrestling match, of ideas and trying to do the right thing and grow the state and create opportunities and because we're an aging state where we're bleeding young people, and how do we get more young people to stay here and have families? And I think we just had the smallest kindergarten class enrollment since 1986. That's going to be working its way through. And that's your future tax base, it's your future workforce. So it's probably one of the biggest issues that we face. So we're trying to really make this state more competitive to grow it. And so it's definitely no shortage of challenges.
Yeah, I definitely...
Does that include homeschoolers?
I believe it does. Yeah, I believe it does. Homeschool, parochial, I think it's across the board. It's just people aren't having kids. Our birth replacement rate is greatly declining, like it is in many places in the world. But I mean, just from a year ago, there's 16,000 less school-age children than there were last year. It's just, and they expect it to go down by another 5% by 2030 and 10% by 2035. And again, it matters. If you're not growing, you're dying. Mm-hmm. And there's real economic ramifications to that. And that's why you're seeing, a lot of industry getting involved with colleges and building partnerships because they need a pipeline, especially things like trades and nurses. Teachers, not just any teacher. I mean, the shortage of like math teachers and science teachers and special education teachers. There's just some real critical shortages that we have in PA, and so we're trying to find ways to say, hey, we'll help you out if you agree to get in this high demand job. We'll pay you a certain amount of money so you have less college debt. But the deal is, for every year we help you, you got to work in that high demand field and live in Pennsylvania for a year as well. So we had 11,000. It opened up in March. It was a bill I wrote. It's called Grow PA last year, and we literally in 3 weeks had over 5,000 kids sign up to make that commitment. And now, as of today, the last I saw, it's over 11,000. And so it's sometimes those kind of incentives and policies can lead to the growth that we need in order to hopefully turn around that demographic decline we have.
Yep. I want to point something out. I mean, you just keep kind of going back to the youth. I can tell that that's a really important piece. And you said, hey, you maybe thought you were going to be a coach, then you were working with at-risk kids, and it just seems like with a lot of these bills, you're keeping the youth in mind. So I can tell that that's just a really important part of it for you.
Yeah, and it's our future, in many different ways. Someday we're going to need educated, skilled young people to take care of us, or to teach future generations. And it can't be overlooked the importance of making sure that our young people can thrive here in PA, and more importantly, stay here in PA too. And if we don't, and we've had a real bad run where, I was reading an article recently where there was this massive chunk of students that are all going to schools in South Carolina, from PA, Maryland, and New Jersey. And what it is these states, I give them credit, they're offering these kids out-of-state merit scholarships. Come here, or, watch, Gamecock football or Alabama football, and they end up staying there. And here we are, the second largest importer of out-of-state students in the country with how many colleges we have, but most of them weren't staying here. So I would argue, A, it's not the best investment of our state tax dollars, because the return is we want people to stay here. So we're trying to change the model a little bit. And hopefully it also makes the colleges adjust and offer things that are relevant to a young person's future. And, listen, everyone can be a dreamer and be whatever they want in their life. But then you also have to have the reality conversations with folks. It's like, yeah, you might want to get your degree in this, but there's no jobs around here for that. And you wonder why they leave. So make the schools compete and offer relevant things instead of just giving the schools the money directly and the kids still taking out massive amounts of debt. I'd rather give the family and that kid money and have them make a decision that's going to be in their best interest. They'll have less debt coming out the door, and hopefully plant the roots, help them buy a house sooner. It's all interconnected, and it's something that's really desperately needed. And that was a bill, we got that through unanimously through both chambers. That's how important that issue is right now. And so we're really proud to write that one.
Yeah, you're certainly taking some creative angles to accomplish some things, but I want to kind of go back to what makes you sort of unique, and that's that you played football and you wrestled. And I think that teaches two things that most people don't have. I mean, you know how to take charge of something, full ownership of it from wrestling, but you also know that team aspect of it, getting people to play ball with you. Yeah. How important are those two things in what you currently do?
It was interesting because, and more on the team thing, I'm going to lean a little more towards the football one, just from the standpoint of, you can have the best players in the world, but it's 11 different guys on the field. Each has a specific responsibility. And usually if a play is going to be successful or a defense is going to stop a play from being successful, it requires all 11 of those people to do their job or their assignment the best that they can. And it's something that was always drilled into my brain. I'm fortunate to be surrounded by people who kind of buy into that team mentality as well. And I certainly realize too that, what I'm able to get done in my life right now as a job is really because of the team I have around me in the Senate, whether it's my team that's in the district office in Strasburg that helps people navigate the system, or it's the team up in Harrisburg finding ways not only to write legislation, but to get other people and encourage other offices to get on board and co-sponsor it and support it. It's always played a really big deal, that team mentality. But I'd be honest, the biggest team in my life is my family. And never lose sight of, like right now, it's been a long summer with this budget stalemate. I've been up there constantly. We've been up there through weekends. And if I didn't have a great teammate and partner, my wife, in helping to carry that ball, and we got 4 teenagers, all in their athletic prime doing things. And if I didn't have her coordinating that or carrying the ball when I was gone, it would have been really tough. But, there's definitely the team approach that we learn in sports, and what I love about sports, and which I always say, as much as people, I will say with certainty that my lessons, whether they're physical or mental, in wrestling and football, I put as much value on that as I do the education that I got, because the learning part's very important, but the character, the work ethic, the preparation aspect, to me is something that is really a grassroots thing that I wish more and more young people, boys, girls, and it doesn't have to necessarily be football or wrestling. It could be basketball. It could be band. It could be all these different things are so critically important. And coming from a background working with kids whose lives have gone off track, I can tell you and sit here, I rarely saw a young person come into that kind of environment and facility that did things after school like sports or various activity clubs, and so it's why it's really important to get kids involved in doing things that are beyond the classroom, because of the lessons that they have. And so I never saw a star athlete, or team player really come into that environment. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I think it lends towards avoiding that kind of stuff on many different fronts. So, but yeah, just incredible team lessons.
What would you say to a wrestler who was maybe thinking about getting into politics when they graduated? Let's say they're just coming in as a freshman. What are some classes you might think would make sense for them? What are some directions you might give them or advice you might give them?
So let me start off by saying this. Like for me, I went to college for like sociology, criminal justice. And again, never any intent. There's a lot of people out there who think you got to be a lawyer or you have to have a political science degree in order to get into politics. I would say A, that's not necessary, and B, I don't think they make the best elected officials and leaders up there. What makes politics work, A, is having people involved, and we need a lot of good people. But I will tell you that some of the best elected officials I've ever seen, some of them only ever had a high school diploma, and they were a farmer. Or a mom who got sick of the drug use at their schools and started some DARE programs back in the 80s, and that's what led her to be involved, and she only ever had a high school degree. If you're the kind of person that sees an issue, you're willing to listen, you're willing to ask questions and do your own research, that's what's amazing. I go into this, anyone who walks into politics or in that building and thinks they know everything about everything will never get anything done. If you're the kind of person, though, that when your topic comes up and you're surrounded by people that you know that it's a real, I mean, I wasn't a farmer, but I represent one of the largest ag communities in the state. And I know that if I have some real ag questions or there's legislation coming up, I know who to go to. I have relationships with them.
Yep.
We have guys in the General Assembly who are actually farmers, and you listen to their experiences. That to me is what we need more of on every level of government. And so first and foremost is, at a minimum, please vote. It's so critically important. Secondarily is, there's so many ways to get involved, and not just as a full-time politician either. Yeah, running for Congress, running for state Senate, running for U.S. Senate, and whatever it might be is good, but think about the local communities too and the importance of what they oversee. Some people may say, well, I really like my job. Why wouldn't I do that? Well, a good way, maybe you'd be great at being a township supervisor. And guess what? That's critically important. Who's picking up our community's trash and keeping things sanitary? Who's keeping our community safe? We started off talking about, what happened over in York, but I mean, these are the locals that oversee a lot of these things that are so important. Every time you flush a toilet or you turn on your sink to make sure water runs, there's someone elected somewhere along the line that's making policy decisions or budgetary decisions that impact that. That's a great way to give back. There's also plenty of opportunity to volunteer, to be on commissions, authorities, boards. Whether you care about kids that are abused, whether you're kids with developmental disabilities, whether it's seniors and the care that goes to them. There's so many boards and my days as a county commissioner, I mean, there were hundreds of positions, and it was really tough to find people to make it all work. So I would encourage a lot of people, and I think especially for anyone who's comes from an athletic mindset or a wrestling mindset, man, there's so many similarities. If you look at this, you're entering the tournament to make a real impact, right, and to advance the ball as far as you can. To me, I've always looked at it through that lens, and we need more people like that.
Okay, so we have this virtual career fair coming up.
Yeah.
What are maybe some directions you'd give for them as they're looking at maybe some different opportunities? What would you tell them to ask themselves?
Well, first and foremost is please find something that every day you're going to want to get out of bed and want to go to. If you see something that it doesn't really excite you or do it, it's tough to get up every day and do that.
Yeah.
So find something you're passionate about. Keep your mind open. A lot of people, just like I gave the example with people thinking they have to have a political science degree to get into politics, the fact that you might have a degree of some sort doesn't mean you can't work in a different field that might bring you more satisfaction or might be better for your family. So look at a wider net. Be respectful, be courteous, be engaging, make eye contact when they're talking with an employer, and it's all those little intangibles sometimes that people are looking for that make a difference. That's why all our dads probably as wrestlers always taught us to do a firm handshake, right? Yeah. It's those intangibles matter, but keep your eye open. There's a lot of great opportunities. And even more so as we see more and more jobs that are unfilled out there because of our shrinking workforce. There could be something there that you just never thought of that might catch your eye, and explore it, find out about it, and see if it might be good for you.
Well, Senator, I appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, and I'm thankful. Everything you're telling me today that I'm learning about, I'm super thankful for all the work you've done. And I'm glad to become a resident here soon in Pennsylvania.
Awesome.
I got to go to the DMV. So, yeah, thank you for everything. And that's another episode of Headgears to Handshakes.